All right, so let's put some of the things that we've learned about view components into a practical application here. So this looks a lot scarier than it really is, because if you drill down to what I've done to start this particular project, you'll see that it's just a repeat of all the things we've already been doing. So I've created, I'm going to create a Bootstrap scenario. And so I'm going to utilize Bootstrap in my view solution here. And so if you're familiar with Bootstrap, you should recognize that there is a div class container. So I've created a container, and in my container is where I'm keeping my view instance. And so I've wired up my view instance by doing the following. I put in a script tag to my app.js file. In my app.js file, I've created an instance of view. So I created a new view which accepts an object of the following properties. The first one is L for element, and element is the element that you've wired up, the template for the view instance that you're creating, which is this part right here. This should be a review, but I'm just showing you what I've done here. And so inside of that instance of my view object, I have data properties. And in my data properties, I've created a property called puppies, which is an array of objects. These should probably be on the same line just to make it, oh, that's all right. I was going to say make it clearer to see, but oops. Yeah, I guess it's fine just the way it is instead of my mucking it up there. All right, so I have an array, and you can tell it's an array from the open and close bracket. That's yellow there. And then I have an array of objects. I'm going to do this anyway because I think this will make it clear. I have an array of objects, and obviously these are all puppy objects, so I have images that match. So this is kind of where I was headed. This is what my intentions were. I should have done this before the video, but I didn't. Just trying to clean this up a little bit, save some real estate, and hopefully give you a visual of what my intentions were. There we go. All right. So now maybe you can see a little bit more clearly that this is an array of objects, and these are apparently our puppy objects. Each of those puppy objects has a title of some type, which is a string, because I'm being creative today, puppy 1, 2, and 3. Some kind of text, and as the string that represents the puppy image. And all of these images are being held in a subfolder called images. So that should be pretty straightforward. So let's see. So I created this card component, and in that card component, I started off with view.component. Remember again that the component has to be created before you create the instance. If you do it the other way around, it won't work. I'm calling this particular component card. That is the word that I can use to create my, looks like HTML, my tags, my markup tags. So my markup tags are going to have the same name that I put inside of this quotations, followed by a comma, followed by an object. And this particular object starts off with the word template and a colon. And then using those backticks, I can put in the HTML that represents what I want each instance of this component to look like. And so our challenge that we came up with the prior series of videos was getting data into our component. And that's what we tackled in some of those other videos. So I'm going to demonstrate some of how this works in this particular video. So by refreshing my page, I believe that I also, yep, and I didn't bring to your attention, that I also already went to the Bootstrap page and I clicked on Get Started, and I copied in this CDN into this link here. So it's kind of off screen here, and I don't really need to see the rest of that just because of real estate, but it's just this long CDN link that I linked here so that I can have a bootstrapped page. And I think that's it as far as the setup. So I put it in a div class container because that's what Bootstrap does in order to have the content about 80% and then centered in that, that viewport. All right, and then I think that's everything. So then remember that I have a card here, and then if I create a second markup with the word card, then I'm going to get a second card, which I don't really want in this case. I'm going to show you what I do want, but this is just for a demonstration of how we're going to get things started. All right, so that's the setup of this particular video. All right, so what I'm going to do is in Bootstrap, I want to take you to this word called, coincidentally, and not really coincidentally, named components. And I'm going to click on components, and I'm going to go to card. This is one that we're pretty comfortable with, I think, by now, hopefully. If not, you will be. And it's not a coincidence because components are very much a thing. And if you look at the code that is incorporated in this Bootstrap card component, you'll see, first of all, that it is a single element. There is a root element, which is what we need. We're interested in that. So it's a root element with some other elements embedded underneath or nested inside, which is perfect. This is what we want to do. So what we're going to do in this example is we're going to use Bootstrap's card component, and we're going to incorporate that into our view card component. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to erase whatever I had here as kind of a starter in my template. And let me give myself some room here and hopefully a good visual. So there's my backtick and there's my closing backtick. And inside of these two backticks, I'm going to control paste that div, the Bootstrap's div card component. Hope that makes sense. Probably could do some indenting. Hopefully this will clean some things up a little bit. And that looks a little bit better. This is probably could be indented a little bit just for readability. Just makes it a little bit easier to see. It could be all on one line as far as the browser is concerned, but we're trying to make it easier for us to read. All right, so now let's see if I go back into my document. Now I have a Bootstrap card component that I could replicate a couple of times. Remember, there's always that. If I created a second and do this again just to see it, now I can create several cards. But now the challenge is going to be sending each of those individual cards unique data. And the idea is that we're going to send this unique data from the view instances, the root instances array of objects. So that's where we're headed. All right, so we saw in the first week that we did working with Vue, I'm looking at my Vue instance. Now remember that the component itself cannot by itself just see the puppy's data. That's something that we either send to it or that Vue, the root instance, is going to send to the component. So that's what I'm going to do in this example. I'm going to utilize the fact that this card exists inside of the Vue instance, the root instance. And as a result, if I have access to, at this point, I have access to all of the puppies. So in other words, let's do a v-4. So we're going to loop through the array of puppies. v-4 equals, and then I'm going to do let's see, what can we do? Pup in puppies. So I'm just accessing from the root instance because I'm currently in the root instance. I'm not within the component. So because I'm working in the root instance, I have access to the puppies. I can loop through each of the puppies. And every time this code loops through the puppies, it's going to put each object into pup. And it's going to do it. It's going to create this card for however many puppies I have in that array. So just to prove the point, let's do this. Let's print out pup just to make sure that that's in fact what's happening. And so let's just see. All right, so I do in fact have 3 cards. And if I look in inspect element, I should see that I have 3 divs that were created, 1 div for each of the puppies. If we look at our component, we'll see, where did it get a div? Div class equals card. Well, that's because that was the template. And so for every puppy that was found, for every object, card displayed our template, and our template had a class card for each puppy then. And so we have 3 divs with class card. So if you look in your HTML here, there's 3 divs with the class of card. And right now they're all identical, and that's the whole point, is that we want to be able to put in our own data. And that's what we're going to have to do ultimately, is we're going to have our instance of our view feed in data to our component. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so if I look at the code I've written here where I have just pup and I refresh this page, pup is not showing up. Because remember that in order to get data from the view instance, from the root instance into a component, I have to do it through properties. So this needs to go away. And I need to figure out how to send the data via properties. And so if you remember, we use vbind, and then here, and then we're going to say vbind, I did that not correct, vbind, colon, and then the property that I want to create. So I'm going to create a property called title. And I'm going to say vbind title equals pup dot, what did we call our pups? Title for a bad or good. I don't know if that's a good, these words happen to be the same. I probably did that so that way you could see where we're going with it. So the idea here is I have to use vbind in order to send data into my component. So my component has to have a way to receive that data. And so I need to set up my component to receive, let's see here, props. And props accepts an array. And one of those data elements then that I want to be able to receive is title. So I'm going to put the word title. Now those have to match. Remember, this has to match what's inside of here. And so the idea then is either root, I'm going to send via this title property this data. And then the component says I'm going to catch that information here in my props that I defined here in the array. And I'm going to then put that information somewhere in my template. So I'm going to put it here, in this case, in where the title was. Did I do that? Yep, title. And then T-I-T-L-E. Spelled wrong. T-I-T-L-E. So that's how that chain is working. Let's just refresh the page and verify that that's in fact what's happening. So you can see that it did work. So to reiterate, in order to send data from my view instance, in other words, my view instance has these puppies, an array of objects. I'm looping through that array of objects here via the component that I created. In order to get data from the root instance, this app instance, into my component, I have to do it by sending properties. In order to send properties, we use this vbind. And I'm saying vbind title. I created this name. It could be anything you want it to be. I could call it pup titles, so maybe that'll help see the visual. So I'm creating this property called pup titles, and I'm giving it pup.title as I'm looping through this. Okay. And so if I send data to my component via this property called pup title, I need to have that exact same name. So I have to change this pup title because we changed it a little back here. So I have to have defined in my component a way to catch that attribute. So I'm catching it in pup title, and now I'm putting it into my template here with the word pup title. All right, so let's refresh just to make sure that in fact that is what's happening. Okay, so we're also going to do the same thing with this body. So we'll see the same thing, just another example using the body. So now with doing the exact same method, as I'm looping through each of these puppy objects, I'm going to put the body information in this body here. So I'm going to replace this text here with the text from the puppy's object. And I'm going to use pup body just to give a different word. So this is where I need to put this data from my view instance. So from the view instance, I need to put that data into a property and then put that data into my template. So how will we do that? Exactly the same way. I'll put a space here. I'll put vbind, that's how we send data, colon, and I will call this pup body. So if I have pup body here, let's see, equals, and then I need to say it's going to be pup.body. So I'm pulling out that property and putting it here, pup.body. So if I use pup.body here, then I need to make sure I catch it in properties here. So I'm going to do pup body. And then I have to put pup body into my page here, into my template. And so I'm going to do that right here. So there's pup body. Okay. So let's see if we can put that all back on the seam screen. So again, from here into my template, into my components, and then into my template. So if I spelled everything right, now everything should be changed with whatever's in my object here. All right, So the last one, same idea, is we're going to do the image source. So it's exactly the same thing, except I am going to do a concatenation, so it'll do things a little bit differently, and I'll show you. All right, so let's tackle that image source. All right, so here is the string. We want to put this into a v-bind, which we will then define in props, which we will then put into this image source right here. All right, so again, I think I just deleted something. I did. Okay, v-bind. Let me make this so we can see it down below. Toggle word wrap. Okay, there we go. So v-bind, and we'll call it pup image. So incidentally, I don't believe this will work if you make these capital, by the way. If you make it a capital, I don't believe it's going to work. So make sure you don't put any symbols or any spaces, that your attribute names are all lowercase and no extra symbols. So if it's not working, it might have to do with that. So maybe it's too late to tell you that, but I just thought of it as I was typing this out. All right, so pup image. So we need to catch pup image here. So I need to have a pup image. And so now I can put in here. Now this is going to be a little bit different, and this is what I'm trying to add to the piece of the puzzle here. So if I just put in pup image, it probably won't work because my pup images reside in a folder called images. And so I have to have an expression in here. So I'm going to keep those double quotations, and inside in a single quotation, I'm going to put, I'll put some space here just for readability. I think that'll work. So I need to have the images and then the / and then plus pup image. And so I have to lay that out just a little bit differently, just so that way I can make sure that I get the, I think that's going to work, pup image. So let's give that a try and see what happens. And it didn't work, so let me figure out why it didn't work. Let's see if I get an error. Yep, found v pup image, so it is not pulling that over, so let me figure out why that didn't happen. So v-bind, oh, I did this wrong, didn't I? I didn't finish this out. v-bind pup image equals, and I didn't put in the value, pup dot, and it was image src. That would make sense. So I set up the attribute or the property, but I didn't actually send the data. So now let's see what happens. And it still didn't work, and the reason being is, remember that when you use a property of an HTML property, you can't just put in source equals. This is an attribute of a HTML element. So instead of source, we have to do v-bind here. So remember, v-bind is kind of serving several purposes for us. It gives us the ability to send data from our view instance into our component, but it also gives us the ability to send an attribute into our HTML element. So let's just refresh that, and now we definitely have our puppies. So let's see, what can we do to sort of clean that up now? We could probably do like we could do something like div class row. I think that's a Bootstrap thing that we could probably add to those to make them side by side. And I think there we go. I'm just adding some Bootstrap to this. I think that we could probably also, there we go. And now we've got 3 side by side. So just a little Bootstrap thing. It bothered me that they were all on top of each other, so I wanted to finish that out and just show you that the Bootstrap classes and rules still apply. All right, so in this video we tackled the ability for us to pull in or to create a template. We created a template, we're creating a component. We created a template from a Bootstrap component, and then we were able to send data in from our view instance into our components. And so we were able to do that by looping through each element in our puppy array, which gave us an object. And every time we looped through that array, we got an object. Our object went into pup. So every time we looped through our array of puppies, we got a pup, which utilized the component that we created, which then created all of this Bootstrap component for us. And then we utilized, so that was the v-for that allowed us to loop through all of that. And then we used vbind, which gave us the ability to send our component unique information for every time we went through that, we looped through that element, through those arrays. We were able to bind via properties, pup title, which went in here. We use vbind for pup body, and we use vbind for the image. And so with pup title and pup body, we could very easily just pop in the mustaches, that property name. But we ran into a little bit of challenge when we got to the image source, because we have to remember that we can't just put in a string in our image source, that we too have to use vbind to send that HTML element some data that it needs. Kind of the same idea. So we're sending the image element, the HTML image element information it needs, and it needs this string. And so we also have to vbind that as well in order to get to our images. So kind of sets you up for the movies. So hopefully this will lend itself into the movie database using Axios that we've been doing so far.